It is now my pleasure to present the Honorary Award. Tom Robinson. Some people would call Tom Robinson greedy. To become accepted as a musical icon would, for many, seem more than one life's work. But to then be honoured for reaching the peak of a second profession as a radio broadcaster would seem to be the mark of a person who just doesn't know when to stop. As a musician, Tom Robinson has written with Peter Gabriel and Elton John and has had hit records with his own songs on both sides of the Atlantic and across Europe. He was one of the major figures to emerge from the new wave of the 1970s and one of the few to go on consistently writing great music. In that era, he toured extensively, including playing at Madison Square Garden in New York, and his 2468 Motorway remains a familiar anthem. Tom's music was never just fleeting pop songs, but compositions whose impact far exceeded the usual stuff of chart successes, tackling sexual politics in Glad to Be Gay, the environment, and in his masterful song War Baby, the political divide in Europe. His music, then and now, reflects a person of principle and passion. At the height of his musical success, he became perhaps the foremost voice in the struggle for gay and bisexual people to be heard and respected. Indeed, it was his articulacy that saw his move from interviewee to interviewer, as his skill behind the microphone quickly became recognized. There are few, if any, broadcasters who can claim to have presented programs on BBC Radio's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Live and 6 Music on a regular basis. These have included The Locker Room, a long-running series about men and masculinity, Something Understood, and Pick of the Week. He was the natural choice for the BBC when called upon to host the Home Truths tribute programme to John Peel. In this second career, Tom was recognised as being at the very top of his game when winning a Sony Award as a documentary maker. Throughout his careers, Tom has been a leading voice campaigning for the freedom of the individual. His own life has included dark periods of depression, but he has responded with a life which has been rich with achievement and generosity to others. It could be said that Tom has something of a third career. Tom now expends equal energy in the support of new artists and encouraging a new generation of musicians. It is the central theme of his current BBC 6 Music programme and also reflected in concerts he promotes, both in the UK and Europe. Tom has joined us at the university on a number of occasions as an inspirational speaker. Vice-Chancellor, I present you Tom Robinson, who is to receive the award of Honorary Doctor of the University in recognition of his continued strong associations with the university and outstanding credentials as a broadcaster and musician.
On behalf of the Senate and the Council of Buckinghamshire New University, I'm delighted to confer the award of Honorary Doctor of the University on Tom Robinson.
This concludes the presentation of awards. It is now my pleasure to invite Tom Robinson to come to the lectern to give his keynote address.
I think it was the comedian George Burns who said there are two things about getting older. One is you lose your memory, and I don't recall the other thing. For which reason I've written down a much more condensed version of the last 61 years than the one you've just heard, just to fill in some of those gaps. So this is my own life in 100 words, flat. Musical family, Quaker education, unhappy teens, nervous breakdown age 16. 6 years in a therapeutic community. Journey in 20s from Dole office to top 10 hit in 12 months flat. Achieve mild notoriety as a gay rights campaigner. Nervous breakdown at 30, followed by bankruptcy, psychotherapy, slow recovery, second top 10 hit, age 33, meeting future wife, first work for BBC Radio, fatherhood at 40. I'm now 61, I work mainly as a broadcaster and occasionally renew my own inspiration by trying to help others get in touch with theirs. And I guess that's how I come to be here. You'll have spotted that in that list there's absolutely no trace of tertiary education. And I am extraordinarily grateful to receive an unearned and totally undeserved distinction that all the rest of you have to work bloody hard to get. Thank you. I am particularly grateful to receive it from this university because more than most, it was set up to actually meet a need that wasn't being met. It's not to meet the needs of an elite or a privileged few, but this university has been set up to empower ordinary people who have a dream to take charge of their lives and empower them to do so. People come here because they want to be here, not seeking status for its own sake. People come here to acquire skills and disciplines. Basically, as I understand it, you come here in the belief that where you start out from doesn't have to be where you end up. So, I take my hat off to you. I never managed to achieve anything that you have achieved, the acquisition of skills, disciplines, knowledge, by process of application, patience, and hard, bloody work. Well done, all of you. Now, this is a strange position you find yourselves in now, because you're both at the end and at the beginning. And one more crib sheet here, T.S. Eliot said, what we call the beginning is often the end. And to make an end is to make a beginning. The end is where we start from. And the end of education is actually where things really do start out. I mean, I don't know firsthand the first thing about degrees, but my mother and I were the only members of our family who didn't end up as graduates in those far-off days of free education. For my dad and my brothers, a degree was only the start of where they were going in their lives. You could not have predicted where any of them would have ended up. My dad, his parents were a farmer's daughter and the son of a Lincolnshire factory clerk, and his ambition rose no higher than being a vicar. So he went to university and read English, and within 2 terms of reading modern English literature, completely lost his faith in God and wondered what to do with the rest of his life. 40 years later, he ended up running a port in Middlesbrough. Nobody could have known. My big brother read economics, and it ended up as a TV producer making soap operas in Cambodia, which is what he's doing now in his 60s. My kid brother got an engineering degree and ended up first at British Leyland, hated it and left just in time not to be made redundant, retrained as a plumber against all expectations, and all his relatives shook their heads and went, I don't know what he's doing, he's selling himself short. And he now installs renewable energy systems as a specialist, putting in wood-burning stoves and solar panels and stuff, and is a complete specialist in the field and is doing very well indeed. Thank you. Well, now that's all very well, I hear you say, because that was in the good old days. And everybody of my age and from my generation will issue you dire warnings about how bloody awful the time this is for anybody to be starting out on their lives and in their careers, and it's not like the good old days, and there's a lot of doom and gloom and bollocks that is talked about that. I have lived through every so-called golden age of the past 50 years. Take it from me. The 1950s, yes, we got the start of the welfare state, we got free education, we got the health service being set up, but it was also a time when the whole of Britain was in ruins from the Second World War, not least our economy. We were completely flat, broke, bankrupt. London was full of bomb sites. The atom bomb had just been invented. For the first time, it was possible to wreak unimaginable destruction on civilian populations. The Cold War had just started. Russia and America had formed these massive power blocks, vowing to rub each other out. Berlin got divided. A cold iron curtain went across the whole of Europe. If you were thinking, shall I start out my career now, or was this a good time to bring up a family? With Suez, Aden, rationing the Berlin airlift, you would not have thought the 50s was a great time to be doing it. As for the so-called swinging 60s, we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, and just because, you know, in retrospect, something that could have happened didn't happen, doesn't mean to say it wasn't a very, very real possibility at the time. In 1962, America and Russia came that close to destroying the whole planet with the Cuban Missile Crisis. They both had enough megatons stored up in their silos to wipe out every living sentient creature on the planet. We lived through that under that constant threat of annihilation. That's why we went on the peace marches at the time. And as for the racism, the sexism, the homophobia that the society was imbued with at that time. Yes, there was employment available, but not if you were black or female or gay or even Irish. It was not a great time to be any kind of minority. And how they figured out that women were somehow a minority, I still don't quite know. We had Vietnam going on. In the US, the civil rights movement was being beaten back in the South by batons and bullets. Racist governors of whole states were doing their best to suppress people of color in their population. It was the most awful time for people struggling for their basic human rights. Again, the 60s, when you actually think back to what it was really like, not the golden flower power marketed version that gets sold to us on chocolate box wrappers these days, it was not a great time. The 70s, of course, were much better. No, they weren't. We had the 3-day week, we had industrial strife, we had Cambodia being bombed, an escalation of the Vietnam War, we had the National Front marching on our streets through racially sensitive areas, we had recession, we had mass youth unemployment for the first time, we had race riots, the like of which put the other week to shame in terms of their destructive power and divisiveness within the communities we lived through. The 70s were a bloody awful time to grow up. On the other hand, we had the 80s with Margaret Thatcher, Ronald Reagan, AIDS, the Falkland Islands, the destruction of our coal and manufacturing industries. I mean, let's not spell it out. There is no golden age when everything was great and it was the perfect time to set out on a career. Even 10 years ago, if you just wind the clock back 10 years, exactly 10 years, you've got 9/11 and the Iraq War brewing. So I would say to you, the good old days are here and now. There has never been a better time to be starting out as somebody intelligent, with qualifications, with get up and go, with intelligence and a knowledge of how to be a digital native than now. We live in the middle of a revolution. All the old orders of what employment means, what companies mean, how business is structured, how the media are structured, everything is all shifting. Nobody knows how it's going to end up. A fish in a fish tank can't see the water. We are living in those times. We can't see what those times mean or where they're going, but we do know that everything is in flux and it's all to play for right now. In my own industry, with the music business, to give you an example, when I started out as a musician in the 70s, you had to go through gatekeepers. You could have all the talent in the world, but unless you got past the gatekeepers, you would never, ever get heard. You could make music in your bedroom till you were blue in the face. Nobody would ever hear it unless a record company gave you permission to make a demo, because we didn't have cheap home recording like you have nowadays. Nowadays, open up a laptop and you can make something that will go to the top of the charts, just with the software that comes with it. Back then, if you wanted to record a drum kit and a band, you had to go into a demo studio, and that cost money, and mostly the record companies only had that money. So unless the record company said, yes, you may, you couldn't even make a demo. Once you'd made the demo, you couldn't make a record unless a record company said so. And then, once you'd made a record with the record company and made a single, and it was a great single, unless you got past the front door at Radio 1, nobody would ever hear it. We only had a centralized BBC radio service across the country with one station, and the Radio 1 playlist ruled the roost. John Peel might play your cassette in the middle of the night, and maybe a couple of people would go out and see your gigs. But if you wanted a career, you had to get past the gatekeepers. These people set themselves up as arbiters. They were open to terrible corruption, if not literally corruption through bribery. At least it made them have a warped idea of their own importance as A&R people at record companies or as playlist radio producers. None of that is true today. Today, all you have to be is good. If you wrote The Next Creep by Radiohead or The Next 1999 by Prince, all you would have to do would be put it up on a SoundCloud page and email 100 people about it. If it was really genuinely that good, if it was basically a "fuck me" song. Because people can write those kind of songs. It is possible. I managed it only twice in a 30-year career, but I did manage it. And both times, those songs got into the top 10. But that was because I got lucky with the gatekeepers. You only have to write the song, and people will beat a path to your webpage. So that's, for the people involved in music at least, that's certainly true. The audience, though, for whatever you do, whether you're doing sculpture, furniture, or any kind of creative endeavor, is global. So the connectivity gives us huge advantages. It presents challenges as well, because if you log on to Elance to offer your services, as you can now, and offer your services in a huge variety of fields to a global marketplace, you're competing against people in Bangalore, people in Alabama, people all around the world. But again, all you have to be is good. And we get good by doing. So remember, this is the start, not the finish, of the acquisition of wisdom, knowledge, and development of those skills. But you have those basic skills, and where you go with those, I can tell you something about, although I know nothing about the acquisition of those skills. The key is persistence. The best advice I was ever given in the early days of trying to get a record deal was, if there are 50 record companies in London and you have a demo that you're sending out, until all 50 of them have sent you back a letter saying, no, it isn't what we're looking for, you haven't yet failed. What people usually do is send out the demo 3 or 4 times, don't hear anything back, they get discouraged and give up. Persistence, persistence, persistence is the key. You have to have a phenomenally thick skin to succeed. You have to be phenomenally cheeky to succeed. Fear of rejection is the main thing that is going to hold you back in your coming career. And losing your fear of rejection and developing a thick hide like a rhinoceros is the thing that will help you to the greatest degree. At BBC Six Music, we have interns working on my show. We have them for 4-week periods, and it's so interesting watching people of your generation coming through to work on the show, because there's such a difference according to the personality of the person. Some people kind of just drift through it in a dream, don't really get what's going on, don't ask any questions, and just go away at the end. And you can't really remember much about them. But at least 3 of the people we've had through in the last 2 years who've just done a 4-week internship on the show have ended up being employed at the BBC. One of them, within 6 weeks, had a full-time job at 5 Live, just because while he was in the BBC building, he made contacts. He looked through the phone book. He took down names and addresses. He shook people's hands. He handed them his business card. Cheeky. He risked rejection. He risked them going, "Who the hell are you?" But he did it, and he had the job, like that. Others have found themselves jobs in regional radio. There's another one who's working upstairs at Radio 2 now. It's that persistence and that cheekiness that really gets you in there. Fear of rejection is the biggest hang-up. Now, we're not just talking, though, about individual achievement, about what we personally can do in our own little field, on our own. You know, the hell with you, I'm going for it. Because the greater opportunities for connectivity and connection also don't only mean greater competition on the global market, but it also gives us a greater possibility for collaboration, cooperation, and community. You can lean on the friends that you've made here. In previous generations, people would go their to the 4 winds and never see each other again except at occasional reunions. You can remain connected with the people who are valuable to you, the people who inspire you, the people you get on with, the people you can lean on, swap knowledge with. As a result, after you leave here, you don't have to disappear. This doesn't have to be the last time you're in touch with each other. That's a big change. Also, once we're talking about community, we look at the wider world, how we can help change the world around us for the better. There's so much to complain about, and it's no us just sitting back and moaning about the bankers or the super rich and the way they're screwing the rest of us. You have to do something about it, even if it's only a small way. For instance, in 2 weeks' time, here at the university, the Peace One Day group are organising a day in favour of peace. What can anybody do to bring about world peace on a university campus? Well, we can't do very much, but we can do a little. And the little bit that we do, as good old Eliot said, for us, there's only the trying. The rest is not our business. We have to do our bit to try. I remember in the late 80s, an 80-year-old Quaker woman went to Moscow to plead with Brezhnev to put away the missiles. And when she came back, Radio 4 said to her, "What did you think was going to happen? Did you think he was going to actually see you or talk to you? What was the point?" And she said, "I just had to go and throw my pebble at the wall." And that's what we have to do, I think, throw our pebbles at the wall. One last thing, I'm sorry to drone on like this, but I just want to say one other thing. We have our inner lives, we have our outer lives. We have our waking lives, we have our dreaming lives. The dream is the inner you who's always been with you from the first days of childhood and who is still in there at the moment. We lose touch with our dreams at our peril. You've graduated in skills that enable you to help others achieve their dreams. So those of you involved in law are helping those who are oppressed achieve their dreams of justice. Those of you who are studying sport management and coaching are enabling athletes and others to achieve their dreams. Those of you in music management or event management are helping other people achieve their dreams. But don't lose sight of yours. If you have an inner dream of being a songwriter, don't think about the money or the practical possibilities or the fact that you're going to have to do something else for a living for the foreseeable future. Write songs anyway. If that's what makes you come alive, don't lose sight of it. When you see people just get stuck into the daily reality of earning a living, drudging their way through the course of their daily lives, by the time they get to 40, they hit a brick wall, divorce, nervous breakdown, collapses of all kinds. You have to have 2 sides of you, the dream side and the reality side. Look after your dream, cherish your dream. If you're a songwriter, write songs regardless. If you want to be an athlete, you're going, oh no, I'm too old, I can't get on. Get training. Do it anyway for its own sake. If you want to be an author, start blogging. And if your dream is simply to meet the person you want to love, cherish, and spend the rest of your life with, you can make a start right now by starting to love and cherish yourselves. Bless you all. Have a fantastic day.